Welcome to This Week in Racing. I'm David Land. We are coming to you from the mobile command center here for Indy 500 month. We've got some interesting stories to talk about, and I suspect this video is going to be very controversial because of the reaction I've gotten for one of these stories on Twitter. But needless to say, we're going to be talking about some news and notes from around motorsport. We're also going to be talking about a big-time signing for Red Bull Racing. And also, we're going to talk about NASCAR's Patriotic halftime, and let's get started. So international racing news has kind of seen a lot of moving and shaking. IndyCar might be headed to Abu Dhabi. At the same time, the Brazilian president has said that the Brazilian Grand Prix will not return to Interlagos for 2020. That opens up a possibility that IndyCar themselves are open to, that they could return to Brazil, possibly at the Interlagos circuit. It's a complicated and messy process talking about international races specifically for IndyCar, and more often than not, we find that those proposals don't usually go very well. Scuderia Corsa with Ed Carpenter Racing. Scuderia Corsa, along with Ed Carpenter Racing, announced a new livery for this year's Indianapolis 500, bringing not only the Ferrari red to the car, but also their IMSA sponsor, WeatherTech. It's the first time WeatherTech has been a primary sponsor of an IndyCar, so it's nice to see them come on board. So Red Bull has made a major driver signing that may have a huge ripple effect not only in Formula One, but also into the United States. They have signed Patricio O'Ward, and of course on this channel we've been bringing up or talking about how good this young driver is, how much of a talent he is, and apparently Helmut Marko thought so too, so he signed him up. And O'Ward may move to Formula One as early as 2020. That's what he is targeting himself. Will Buxton has actually let us know that should the need arise at either Toro Rosso or Red Bull proper in Formula One, O'Ward has the requisite number of super license points to jump into Formula One right now, if he so desired. So we knew that Zach Brown with McLaren was interested in signing Patricio O'Ward, but now we found out that it wasn't the only Formula One team that was after him. And actually, Red Bull themselves were looking to sign him for Formula One, which is pretty crazy. Obviously, we know that O'Ward and McLaren were looking at working together on the IndyCar side, and so that also opens the door. What the heck is McLaren going to do next year if they so choose to come into the sport? Because, of course, their driver looks like he's headed to Formula One, and I think me and a lot of other people who are media figures in IndyCar have been asked about Patricio O'Ward as well as Colton Herta, whether or not they're Formula One material. And personally, I have said that both of those drivers, I think, are absolutely F1 material. I think if you put them in a very good car, they can run right at the front with any of those drivers. And it sure is good to see North American talent, not only from a country perspective. Of course, O'Ward is from Mexico, but it's cool to see someone who came up in the North American ladder system. He's raced in IMSA, Indy Lights, IndyCar, and he's had success in all of it. He's an Indy Lights champion, and so it definitely says something for the road to Indy that a driver has not only made it to Indy, but maybe making it to the top echelon of the sport, which is, of course, Formula One from a global perspective. And certainly, I think, especially when you're talking Red Bull, that's a potentially huge move. And another thing that's kind of interesting about this is that generally Red Bull likes to sign drivers a lot earlier than Patricio O'Ward's age. And I think it says something to maybe how their driver development has devolved, so to speak, where you have seen drivers like Pierre Gasly, when they're ready for prime time or theoretically ready for prime time, they don't perform. It may be that Max Verstappen is really the last of the Sebastian Vettel style Red Bull drivers who are just so talented and really were ready when they brought him up. And there's even a possibility that, Toro Rosso is not going to be happy with Daniel Kvyat. So maybe O'Ward could be in a Formula One race before the end of the year. I would not, at this point, rule out that possibility. And so here's the controversial part of this video. This comes from Dustin Long on Twitter. He says, hashtag NASCAR. Charlotte Motor Speedway announces that at the end of the Stage 2 of the Coca-Cola 600, they will bring the cars down pit road and stop the race briefly for all to remember the significance of Memorial Day weekend. So initially when this was brought up and it came across my timeline on Twitter, I didn't really care all that much. And I still really don't care all that much about this. Just on principle, the Coke 600, especially the Coke 600, has been full of so many gimmicks. They've literally gone to a race, the race being 4 quarters, like a football game. So for me, there are 36 races in a NASCAR season, not counting the extracurricular ones. And I would have to rank the Coke 600 as the 36th most important race to me personally. This channel is called Indy 500 month, or this channel has Indy 500 month for a reason. The Coke 600 takes place on the same day as the Indianapolis 500, and oftentimes I'm driving back from the race with my family. I don't really care about what happens in the Coke 600. When this came across my timeline, I just looked at it and just laughed. I said, that's stupid. That's another stupid gimmick. They're pandering. Who cares? It doesn't really matter all that much. But to some of the, harder core NASCAR fans, which this matters to, there was some criticism of this, and I think absolutely justified criticism of this, in that you now have, like I've said, a 4-quarter NASCAR race, and now you're stopping it in the middle. That's halftime. So many fans I saw were quite rightly bringing up this criticism, saying, could this possibly be a way for NASCAR to test this concept and at the same time, be able to put this facade up to, tie it into the Memorial Day weekend and get overwhelmingly positive praise for it, and then maybe possibly implement it into next season's races. Do halftime there. And what would happen would be that the people who had to come out and say that would one of two things would happen. One thing that people would have to do would be to clarify their statement. They'd have to say, I support the military, I support the troops, but, and I felt like that really made a lot of people's arguments seem not as genuine or not as strong because of that. And the reason that they had to qualify those statements is because, knowingly or unknowingly, NASCAR turned the statement, again, knowingly or unknowingly. I'm not accusing them of doing this, but it has happened regardless. The statement, I don't want halftime in NASCAR, now means I am anti-military and I don't support the troops. So when you say that on Twitter, if you say anything even remotely negative about the halftime in NASCAR, you will immediately get 3 or 4 people in your mentions telling you how un-American and what a traitor you are to the country and how you hate the sacrifice that the military members have made. And that's ludicrous. It's so stupid. So I made this tweet, and maybe it was a little bit harsh. It certainly got a harsh response, but I think it's exactly conveys what I just told you in a lot, less space. I said, the more I think about this change, the more it annoys me. It certainly comes off as hiding behind dead soldiers to test a race format, halftime, without criticism, even if it wasn't the intent. Bad look. So it is a bad look because NASCAR wouldn't have done this if their fan base wasn't super into, our troops, support our troops. I get it. I understand it. But this is not a change. So here's the thing that really makes me scratch my head. Obviously, Memorial Day is a very important holiday to those who either have served or have had family members who have served, family members who have died. I get that. I understand that. That's exactly why there is so much pageantry. There's so much patriotic atmosphere in these races. Before this year, it was almost entirely confined to the pre-race. There was the one time in 2009 that many people have brought up that the race had to be run on Monday, and NASCAR, in accordance with the national moment of silence at 3 p.m., stopped the race and allowed the race to have that moment of silence. This race is not taking place on Monday. This race is taking place on its traditional spot on Sunday. I mean, NASCAR, and so a lot of the argument that I've seen has been people coming at me and saying, well, you don't appreciate their sacrifice if you don't want this halftime break. And the statement is always, it's never enough. There's never enough praise that you can lay on the military members. And, here's the thing, is that how does this benefit military members? If the goal ultimately, if there's nothing more important than respecting military members, especially on Memorial Day weekend, they should really just cancel the Coke 600 and send the NASCAR crews and the NASCAR drivers and the NASCAR teams to the VFWs of their local towns, or the Wounded Warriors projects, something like that, and actually make a difference. Actually, put your money where your mouth is. Because all this is, and I hate to use this term because it's politically charged, but it's a virtue signal. That's what it is. It's NASCAR saying how virtuous they are, that they respect the troops, and they're willing to stop their race. They respect the troops so much that they're willing to stop their race. But they can't be bothered to pay the military for flyovers. So what's the best way to honor the military during an auto race? Well, and I hate to do this because people are going to make the comparison, but screw it, I'm going to make it anyway, is that obviously the Indy 500 has always taken place on Memorial Day weekend. And for the longest time, it took place on Memorial Day because the Speedway valued the Sunday for the church more than they valued the remembrance for Memorial Day. But as the race progressed, the opening ceremonies began to become more patriotic and more about the country and about the soldiers who serve. And Jim Phillippe, one of the PA announcers, had this to say at the start of each Indianapolis 500. And it was said right before the moment of silence, which was in the pre-race, because that's where it should be. But I think it captures exactly what the military's role is, how they serve the people, and why they serve the people, and why you shouldn't stop a race to recognize the military. Let me read it. So, on this Memorial Day weekend, we pause here in a moment of silence to pay homage to those individuals who have given their lives unselfishly and unafraid to make it possible for us as free men and women to enjoy the world's greatest sporting event. So, with those words, I think it completely captures the role and the appreciation that the folks at a race have for the military. The military, protecting the country, that's their role. And so them doing their job allows us to do what we love to do, which is racing, in this case anyway. And that's why it's a moment of silence, because I don't think, and I would hope, because I'll be honest with you, I could never be a soldier. It's something that I don't have the constitution to do. So the people who do that are incredibly selfless and incredibly brave. And because of that, I don't think they go in there seeking valor. They don't go in there seeking attention. They don't go in there seeking all this praise. They do it because they love the country. And so the reason it's a moment of silence is because you get a moment to think of those who have thought of you before themselves. And then, because of that, you get to go about your life as normal. And so I think that's the way to handle it. And I don't think NASCAR doing it this way is the right way to handle it. And I'm sorry if that offends you, but that's the way it is. So that's been This Week in Racing. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you didn't, let me know down in the comments. I love respectful disagreements. And by the way, shout out to Eric Easton. We had, a debate on Twitter, but it never devolved into anything particularly hostile or anything. I thought it was a good conversation. It got a lot of people thinking, and it allowed people to have a more informed decision, even if it didn't change anybody's mind. They got to read both sides of it. So I thought that was really productive. So be more like Eric and not like the people who are truly not very nice on Twitter. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more motorsport content, and we will see you in the next video.